You hear the term government shutdown on the news all the time, right? But what does it actually mean when you're the one whose office is about to close? Well, today, we're going to break down the official process, step by step, for the federal employees who actually have to live through it.
And just so you know where we're getting our information, we're going straight to the source. Everything we're about to cover comes directly from the official guidance published by the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, the OPM.
Okay, so first things first, what even is a shutdown furlough? It's not a layoff, that's for sure. The best way to think of it is like a mandatory temporary pause button. You're put in this non-duty, non-pay status for just one reason. The government's funding has officially run out. So what kicks off a shutdown in the first place? Well, it all boils down to Congress. When they can't agree on and pass the funding bills that keep government agencies running, you get what's called a lapse in appropriations. And without that approved funding, a lot of the government is legally required to just stop. And the reason for all this? It comes down to one really powerful law, the Anti-Deficit Act. The idea is actually pretty simple. It says federal agencies are flat out forbidden from spending money they don't have. So if Congress hasn't approved the money, the spending has to stop. And that means the work stops too. But here's where it gets a little complicated. A shutdown doesn't hit everybody in the same way, which, of course, leads to the huge question, who gets sent home and who has to keep showing up to work? So how do they decide? Well, the answer really depends on how an employee's job is legally classified for a situation exactly like this, where the funding disappears. And that leads us to the two main groups. On one hand, you have furloughed employees. These are the folks who are sent home, and they're literally barred from working. Then you have the accepted employees. They're the ones who must continue to work because their jobs are considered essential by law. Now, this is super important. Accepted work isn't just some random decision. The term is very clearly defined in the law. We're talking about emergency work that involves saving human lives, protecting property, or doing things that are absolutely necessary to shut down in an orderly way. Oh, and just to cover all our bases, there's actually a third group called exempt employees. They aren't affected by the shutdown at all, mainly because their jobs are paid for by a different funding source that hasn't run out. For them, it's pretty much business as usual. Okay, so this, of course, brings us to the question that's on absolutely everyone's mind. Whether you're at home or still working, what happens to my paycheck? I mean, for hundreds of thousands of families, this is a huge deal. The financial uncertainty is just massive. So do they get paid or not? Well, the answer, it has two very, very different parts. All right, let's get the bad news out of the way first. During the shutdown, the answer is no. Paychecks stop, period. Remember that Anti-Deficiency Act? It means the government literally can't cut checks. For families living paycheck to paycheck, this creates a huge crisis, even if they know the money is coming eventually. But, and this is a huge but, what happens after the shutdown ends? The answer is a definite yes. Once it's all over, every single affected employee is guaranteed to get full back pay for the entire time they were out, and that goes for both furloughed and accepted employees. And listen, this isn't just a promise or a we hope so kind of thing. It's literally the law. Back in 2019, Congress passed the Government Employee Fair Treatment Act, which made this retroactive pay mandatory. And you see that phrase there, standard rate of pay? That's really important. It doesn't just mean your basic salary. It also includes any of that extra premium pay you would have normally earned. Things like overtime or night differential, you get paid for that too. All right, so we've covered paychecks, but what about everything else? Like that vacation you had planned for months, or, really important stuff like your health insurance. Okay, brace yourself for this one because it catches a lot of people by surprise. If a shutdown starts, any paid leave you had approved, annual leave, sick leave, whatever, is automatically canceled. Poof, gone. The government can't take on that new financial obligation. You're just considered to be in a furlough status. But what about your big benefits? Well, here's some good news. Your health insurance and life insurance coverage, they keep going without any interruption. The only catch is that the premiums you owe will just kind of build up in the background and then they'll be deducted from your back pay once the shutdown is over. Flexible spending accounts are a little trickier. You're still enrolled, but you can't get any claims reimbursed until the paychecks start flowing again. So what happens when it's finally over? A deal gets made and the government is ready to reopen its doors. How does everyone actually get back to work? It's actually a pretty straightforward four-step process. First, the president signs the new funding bill. Boom, money's back on. Then your agency sends out the official notification to come back. You're expected to report for duty on your very next scheduled workday, and behind the scenes, they start working on getting your back pay processed right away.
And the official guidance actually shows a bit of a human side here. It recognizes that a sudden restart can throw your life into chaos, messing with things like childcare. So agencies are told they should be flexible and can grant excused absences if an employee has a legitimate challenge getting back to the office right away. So there you have it. We've walked through the nuts and bolts. The government reopens, people get back to work, and eventually everyone gets paid. But this really just covers the process, right? It doesn't get into the bigger picture. And that leaves us with a huge question. While the shutdown itself might be temporary, what are the lasting ripple effects on public services, on employee morale, and on the entire economy? That's the stuff to really think about.